Good morning, trainers, and welcome to another episode of TogeTips. For today's video, we're going to be recapping our experience with this weekend's Pokémon Go Fest. And as usual for these kinds of podcast-style videos, Chris is back to join me to talk about it. So before we get started, I just want to put this out there, but we are freaking exhausted. We decided to record this segment a few hours after the first day ended, which on one hand was good because the experience was still fresh in our minds. Though, on the other hand, we just played Pokémon Go for 8 hours straight. Also, we're still feeling kind of sore because it kind of feels like we've walked 10 plus miles today. Actually, Chris, you have that tracker app on your phone, so how many miles did we end up walking today?
Yeah, so altogether we walked about 15 miles for the first day. Quite a lot.
Jeez, 15 miles? No wonder my legs kind of feel like jelly.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think we still had a lot of fun, all things considered.
Absolutely. So before we get into the day one details, we want to let you know that this video is being recorded in two separate sections. Because Go Fest is a 2-day event, we'll be recording our experience for the second day tomorrow. So if we sound a bit more energetic later on in the video, that's probably why. But we thought this would be a fun video structure to test out. So with that, let's get right into the Go Fest Day 1 with the habitats.
Yeah, so for the past few Go Fest events that took place globally, there were different habitats for each hour. This is something that we also kind of saw in the Go Tour events for both Kanto and Johto, but it's something that started off in Go Fest 2020 where we had habitats for each hour, and each of those hours would have different Pokemon spawning themed around them. So this year we had Rainforest, Tundra, City, and Plains, and each of those had different Pokemon all themed around them that were spawning in the wild and attracted to incense. So James, what did you think of those 4 different habitats we had this year?
Yeah, I thought the habitats themselves were pretty solid this year. Each one had about 10 or 11 Pokemon per each one, and then we had the additional incense spawns that were really cool. In terms of the shinies, I think they all had very well-rounded shinies. Like, the city had Magnemite, which is a highly sought-after one. Hitmonchan, it had Trubbish, which was a huge one as well. Rainforest, you had like Shroomish, you had Carablast, which was a brand new shiny as well. Then with Tundra, you had Wailmer, you had Cubchoo, you had a lot of ice Pokemon that we haven't seen a lot of since the holiday event. And then I gotta say the Plains was probably the strongest of all the habitats because it had Dunsparce, it had Rufflet, it had Weasel, which was a really cool shiny. And it had Axew for this event, which was another brand new shiny, so that was really cool. And that was a great way because it was also in the wild, so even if you didn't have a ticket, non-ticket holders would be able to find it and hopefully get a shiny as well. So I gotta say the Plains was probably the strongest of all of them.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. There's one thing that I think the Plains did better than all of the others, in our opinion. I know some other players might disagree, but from our point of view, the Plains was also really strong because it didn't have any starter Pokemon, and it kind of lacked a lot of Pokemon who had previously had community days before. Outside of Larvitar, it was a bunch of Pokemon that we usually don't see. As you said, Dunsparce and Axew are some big ones, but even things like Weasel, who's pretty rare, and more rare shinies like Girafarig, those were all really good. All of the others, though, specifically Tundra and Rainforest, they were a bit saturated with a lot of starter Pokemon, and while starters can be exciting, in an event like this, it is kind of disappointing to have a bunch of Community Day Pokemon in hours. I know Tundra had things like Piplup and Poplio, and then Rainforest had a lot of them with Turtwig, Chimchar, and also Mudkip, so it was a little bit disappointing in that regard for some of the others. But overall, I think it was pretty well-rounded. But Plains was definitely the highlight with a lot of good Pokemon.
Yeah, that's definitely a point I had with those as well. It felt like a lot of the more common Pokemon we were seeing too were Community Day Pokemon. Like, I know for Rainforest, I was trying to find, Shroomish and Binacle. And a lot of those were, rare spawns. Like, I found them on Incense, or I'd have to go a longer way to find them. But everywhere you turned, it was either Turtwig or Chimchar or Mudkip, so I think they could have, maybe balanced some of the spawns a bit as well, had them more well-rounded instead of being these Pokemon spawn the most and then these are more rare. Just for those, Like, obviously they have the incense spawns as well, but just make them more well-rounded for the whole thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I will say, speaking of starters, I was a little bit disappointed too that we saw all 3 of the Alola starters spawning. It is kind of exciting because they're new Pokemon, but we did also have an entire season of them just earlier from March through May. So I was a little bit sick of them come this event, and have them spawning a lot was a bit disheartening. But on the other hand, I will say a lot of the special incense spawns sort of made up for that. There were a lot of cool spawns that were either raid exclusive previously, like Clink and Galarian Weezing. We obviously had some exciting regionals like Tropius and Torkoal, and then we already talked about Axew, which was a great Pokemon to have there. And then you even had some Galarian forms like Galarian Mr. Mime, who hasn't really been that available outside of the holiday event the past 2 years. And we also had, of course, Galarian Darumaka, who's a newer shiny and is extremely useful in raids, so that was great too. So I was definitely happy with all the incense spawns, and while I was a little bit let down by a few of the choices they had for the habitat hours, I definitely think those incense spawns made a lot up for it for the ticket holders.
Yeah, those were definitely great, and seeing those, mixed in with the regular spawns was really cool to see.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So now, let's get on to everyone's favorite part of Pokemon Go, and that's the shiny hunting aspect. So this year's Go Fest released 5 new shinies to Pokemon Go, or 6 if you want to include the Unknown Bee. Those new shinies include Numel, Shelmet, Carablast, Shroomish, and of course, Axew. I think the shinies they chose for this event really pop out, and it's really exciting when you get to see them in the wild.
Yeah, for sure. It's really nice to have shinies that you actually see that they're shiny when you catch them, and you're not trying to figure out if they are or not. So that was definitely nice.
Yeah, it was definitely refreshing than some of the previous events we've had where there's been some shinies that it's just like a super lighter color, but all of these were really unique and really awesome to see out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was also nice seeing some of the returning shinies. Some were definitely newer, like Binacle, who we just saw a few weeks ago. And there's also Buizel, who had its shiny released a while ago, but hasn't really been all that common since. And then there's even Giraffrig, who got its shiny during the Johto tour, but hasn't really been that available after that. So seeing a lot of newer shinies like that is definitely nice to see.
Yeah, that's true. And we kind of touched on before that there were a lot of Community Day Pokemon in here, but even still, they chose a lot of really cool, unique shinies for these Community Day Pokemon. Like, I'm a really big fan of the Sinnoh lines, like, Turtwig's a really cool one, Piplup's a really cool one. What else we got in there? We got Mudkip's a really cool one, even though, we just had the event for it back in April, but it was really cool to see it out again.
Yeah, even though Mudkip was a starter, I was also trying to collect XL candy for it to power up my Shundo, and I was still happy to see some people get shinies when they wanted a Mudkip, because, I knew a few people who hadn't been able to do either the original Mudkip Day or also its Community Day Classic, so it was nice to have those, especially for some newer players or those who missed out on those events. But there is one thing I'd like to talk about real quick before we end the shiny discussion, and we will touch on this a little more on the very end of our discussion as we review it, but let's talk about the shiny rate for day 1. This was the day that was supposed to have a higher shiny rate. I know tomorrow or day 2 will have a lower shiny rate because it's more focused on both raiding and Team Rocket. But what did you think about the shiny rate this year?
So today I caught around 1,600 Pokemon, but also checked around close to 1,800. And from that number, I was only able to get 10 shinies total. So my overall shiny rate was pretty low. Also, I didn't really see any shinies until the 4th hour of the event. Also, I really didn't see any shinies until the 4th hour of the event, where crazy enough, I ended up getting a ton of shiny Numel, and it just kind of went off from there, so a lot of cool stuff in that one. Like we said before, the Plains was probably the best one, and, I'm glad I got a lot of shinies from that. But, like we said, it really didn't feel like the shiny rate was boosted for this event, only getting 10 shinies for playing a whole 8-hour event, it just doesn't really feel like it was boosted by a lot, if anything. And I kind of wish in the future they would reveal what that boost exactly is. Is it like a 2% boost? Is it like a 10% boost? Stuff like that, being more transparent would be nice and would kind of help us, decide how good these events really are.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I know I did get a few more shinies than you for day 1. as opposed to your 10. I believe I got 18 this first day, which was definitely nice. But it definitely felt like the shiny rate was lower than past years, and just lower in general. For me, I would get about 1 to 2 each hour of the 8 hours, and I know I did feel a little better at the very end, but it still didn't feel like you were getting shinies left and right. I know the rate isn't as good as a community day where it's about 1 in 20, but it didn't feel that high, especially for a $15 event.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the biggest Pokemon Go events of the year, and to really not have it be boosted by that much when they're saying, like, they made it out to be this really big boost, but compared to some of the stuff we were seeing, like, it really didn't feel like it was all that much. It just kind of felt like all these Pokemon were out and they were just, full odd shinies.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to see them be a little more transparent, as you were saying, but I know they did say for day 2, with it being a little less focused on catching, that the rate will be lower, the shiny rate that is. And that makes me a little bit pessimistic and a little scared for what tomorrow is, because today didn't seem all that high to begin with, as we both said. So I'm hoping it's not too much lower tomorrow, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And we'll be talking about that shortly, so stay tuned for that. Now let's move on to the final part of our day 1 recap, and that's the raids. So for the first day, they had the 1-star, 3-star, and 5-star raids out. So Chris, why don't you tell us what was in the raids for the first day?
Yeah, so for the 1-star raids, we had 2 Pokemon. We had the Gracidea Pikachu, and then we also had Axew, of course, which was really exciting. And then on the 3-star raids, we had Dartrix, Torracat, and Brionne. And if you don't know, those are the second stages of the 3 Alola starters. And then in 5-star raids, we had both Kyogre and Groudon. So James, those were our raids for the day, but what did you think about them?
Ah yes, those raids. So overall, I'd say that the 1-star raids were pretty fair. I wasn't necessarily a fan that they put the costume Pikachu in the 1-star raids, and that's kind of because it was available in the wild and in snapshots, so it didn't really feel necessary being there. Plus, it's obvious that people would be wanting Axew from those raids, so seeing a 1-star and having it pop a Pikachu wasn't that great. I know you and I certainly didn't feel that great when we were going to a 1-star and it just ended up being Pikachu.
Yeah, that was always a disappointment. And unfortunately, that happened a fair amount of times throughout the day today. I almost think that the Pikachu was weighted a little more heavily than Axew, and then it might have not been an even 50-50, but it would be nice if Niantic was a little more transparent about those, because we really wanted to do Axew.
Yeah, we really did, and that was the raid. We didn't even look at the other raids through the event. Like, we specifically only went for the 1-star raids, so having it be a Pikachu when we get there is just, it was super disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said also speaks to the quality of some of the other raids throughout the event, being raids that weren't that exciting overall. I think for us, the 3-star raids being the 3 Alola starters, as I said earlier, we did have a full season of Alola just before this, and a lot of us are kind of sick of the Alola starters, at least for now. Especially without them being able to be shiny or any exclusive moves at the moment, it just seemed kind of pointless to have them in 3 stars, where often one of those would pop instead of a 1-star or even a 5-star raid. And then for the 5 stars, Kyogre and Groudon are pretty good Pokemon and definitely exciting in my book, but to have those alongside Axew is not the most exciting thing. And we also have Kyogre and Groudon in raids for the first few weeks of this month, so it's not like they were really special Go Fest raids.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, again, they could have just scrapped the 3-star raids completely and just gone with the 1-stars and the 3-stars, and I think people would have been happy, but, seeing those 3-stars in there when it could have been something better, it was kind of annoying to say the least, and definitely, especially after seeing them for a whole season, like, it wasn't really necessary having them back this soon. And then for the 5-star raids being Kyogre and Groudon, it was kind of cool seeing them back because it's been a while since we've been able to raid them. I think the last time we could raid them was at the end of last year's Go Fest. But at the same time, we've seen these Pokemon enough times, so seeing them again in raids for one of the biggest Pokemon events of the year was it was kind of lackluster, to be honest. They could have chosen something like Rayquaza or Dialga and Palkia, but these are the two they went with, so I guess it is what it is. That being said, though, there are some pretty exciting things coming to Raids tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about that in our part 2 for the Go Fest recap.
Yeah, so overall, I think it was a pretty mixed bag for raids, but yeah, I look forward to talking about the rest of them tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, that about wraps up the first part of this Go Fest recap. But before we continue with part 2, please enjoy this short intermission featuring some really cool shiny Go Fest catches. And welcome back. We really hope that you enjoyed our shiny montage from the first day of Go Fest. Now, let's transition to the second day. So as usual with day 2, there were several key differences. The various habitats were dissolved into a single spawn pool, Team Rocket was out in full force, and a brand new Pokemon made its debut in raids. So basically, there was a lot of cool stuff involved that we're going to talk about right now. So Chris, why don't you get us started? What were your initial thoughts about the second day of Go Fest?
So going into it, I was actually pretty uneasy. I know we had said that the shiny rates seemed a little bit lower for day 1, so day 2, when we heard that they were going to be lower than day 1 in general, I was a little concerned about what the overall quality of day 2 would be. But I will say the shiny rates did kind of surprise me for day 2. They were lower, for sure, from our experience. We both got less shinies than day 1, but it didn't seem like it was a poor shiny rate by any means. I know we both got a lot of exciting shinies, so that was pretty cool. I did think that the raids were a lot better, specifically the 1 and 3 star raids. I know yesterday we kind of complained about there being not too many Axew, but a lot of Pikachu instead. And when it came to 3 stars, those just kind of seemed to be placeholders with the Alolan starter evolutions. But this time, having a lot more Axew, or we noticed a lot more Axew, and we noticed even some good 3 stars around. Like I noticed a lot of Druddigon. Did you see some Druddigon?
Yeah, I saw a few Druddigon, and those are pretty cool to see.
Yeah, exactly. I know one person we were with is really trying to get a bunch of dragons, so it was nice to have some nice 3 stars in there too, so I was excited for that.
Yeah, I can definitely agree that the raids were better for the second day than they were the first day. And I thought it was really great on Niantic to do that quick turnaround from the first day where we were seeing a lot of issues with the 1 stars and definitely the 3 stars as well. There was something I wanted to make a note of, and that's something that they've done with previous events like this, where they usually turn the raids off that are currently in raids like 2 hours before the event starts. So once something like Go Fest starts, like you get the raids for Go Fest right away. But what happened the last 2 days was the current raid bosses, like we saw some Swinub, we saw some Mega Steelix, and it was stuff like that that weren't Go Fest raids, so seeing them out was just kind of weird and didn't necessarily start the event off at full force. It just felt staggered.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I know we were looking forward to seeing more Axew raids to hunt that shiny, but we saw a few Mega Steelix raids. I know there was a Swinub at one of the main gyms, so it was pretty disappointing in my opinion. But I do think raids were overall better than day 1, and we actually had a different legendary boss this time. We had the brand new legendary, or should I say, the brand new Ultra Beast, Nihilego. And so that was very different than Groudon and Kyogre previously. Groudon and Kyogre are definitely useful for both raids and for PvP. Nihilego, as we said in our previous analysis, is really only good for raids. And it is pretty good there, but it's definitely not the most exciting Pokemon, especially when it doesn't even have a shiny.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say it was nice to see a new raid boss for this event, but it really doesn't do a lot for the game right now. Like, it still needs some better moves and whatnot, but I think in the future it could be better. But right now it was just kind of meh. Just kind of made like a drip instead of a splash like most legendary raid bosses do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Niantic was really betting on this being a huge addition to this day's Go Fest, but it really didn't feel like it. I know they normally don't release shinies right away for legendaries, but I think if they made Nihilego shiny right away, a lot more people would be flocking to those raids.
Yeah, true. And I think, like, this experience will really give them something to work with when they release the other Ultra Beasts in Pokemon Go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, another big feature for Day 2 was the increase in the Team Rocket activity. As we saw with the 2020 Go Fest, the second day was catered all around Team Rocket. So, Chris, what did you think of this year's Team Rocket takeover?
I'll be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed by this Rocket takeover. Back in 2020, I remember they changed up the leader Pokemon, so last time each of the Rocket leaders got a brand new Pokemon, or at least one that they had several months or even years previously, and so it was something new to hunt. I know Sierra, for example, she got her Beldum back in 2020, and so I was going really hard to get a shiny Beldum because she hadn't had that in over a year or so, and I know shiny Shadow Beldum was just something that I was really excited to get, and I was really trying for it. So that was pretty exciting to at least have some returning Pokemon, some really good ones, back in 2020. And I was really expecting that with this Day 2 Rocket takeover, but we didn't actually see that. All the Shadow Pokemon that each of the team leaders had was exactly the same that they've had for the past 3 months or so. And so we've kind of been sick of those Pokemon, especially after the season of Alola, where we can't evolve Execute into Alolan Executor, or Cubone into Alolan Marowak anymore. So that was a big draw for those Shadows, a few weeks ago and a month or so ago. But now that those are gone, it was just kind of lame to have these 3 bosses still lying around.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised about that, considering, we'd had these Pokemon for 3 months already. And I kind of figured, with the start of the season of Go, that we would get new Pokemon for the leaders, but we were just stuck with Cubone with Cliff, Drowsy with Sierra, and Execute with Arlo. But, maybe they'll change soon, but I just kind of wish they would have switched for this day of Go Fest. It would have added one more exciting thing for us to do during it.
Yeah, absolutely. As is, the Rocket portion was pretty meh. I did enjoy the double radar components that we got throughout the event, but just the fact that the leaders were so meh, it just kind of brought it all down. And there was one other thing that I was kind of disappointed by when it came to the Rocket takeover, and that was kind of the difficulty of all of the Rocket grunts and the leaders. I remember back in 2020, they made a lot of the Rocket grunt Pokemon, and as well as the leaders, all of their Pokemon were a lot weaker, so you could take them down a lot quicker. But this year, they were all kind of the same difficulty that they normally are, and that wouldn't be too much of an issue, but because it's Go Fest and time is of the essence, you always want to be checking shinies, whether it's from Incense or in the wild. So when you have really long Rocket battles kind of slowing you down, it's really disappointing. So I do wish they'd weaken them just a bit for this, so that was definitely a letdown in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Any of those things that take time away from, like, catching Pokemon and checking incense spawns, like, anything that can be done to, lessen that and do more time of checking Pokemon, it just would make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. But on a little more of a positive note, I know we briefly talked about how all the various habitats were dissolved into a single spawn pool. What did you think about that today? I know the past 2 years of Go Fest they did a similar thing where Day 2 didn't have habitats or time slots and it was just one big spawn pool. But what did you think about it, James?
Honestly, I was a really big fan of it. To be honest, some of the habitats on the first day were kind of meh, specifically like the tundra and the city habitats. But I really enjoyed, having a lot of those, like, essentially a greatest hits of Go Fest for the second day. The only thing I was really worried about was seeing Axew on the second day, because we had checked sites like Cerebi and Leak Duck, and they hadn't listed Axew as one of the wild spawns. It was only listed as being on Incense. But when we got to the area we were playing at, we actually found a few Axew in the wild. And actually my first encounter with Axew, I got shiny, so I was really hyped about that.
Let's actually see that reaction real quick.
Yo! Let's go!
Yeah, that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised by that. I was telling myself before I clicked on it that I was like, oh, this isn't going to be shiny, because with the rates lessened, I kind of thought it was going to be like a full odd shiny, but it happened.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and I was happy to get my shiny Axew finally toward the very end of the event, just about when we had stopped hunting for the day, so that was really exciting. But yeah, what did you think about the shiny rates for Day 2? I know they were a bit lower. We did both get a little bit less shinies than day one, but were you satisfied with them?
Yeah, I would say the second day shiny rates were kind of comparable to the first day. Like, I know everyone's going to have their different experience with Go Fest, but I kind of saw the same number of shinies on the second day as I did on the first day, so it really just kind of felt the same. Like, I don't know how much they actually boosted it by, but it really didn't feel like all that much.
Yeah, I was pretty similar. I think I got about 5 or so less shinies on day 2 than day 1, but overall it really didn't feel that much different. So I was actually pretty pleased with that, because I think both of us were expecting a lot more disappointing shiny rates after the first day.
Yeah, definitely, but I think also going back to the huge spawn pool instead of doing the habitats, I think that made it easier for people to hunt for the shinies they wanted to instead of being like, oh, I have to wait until this hour to do it. Like, if their Pokemon was featured on day 2, then they could be like, I'm just going to look for this Pokemon, and they'd probably have a better chance of getting a shiny on the second day than the first day.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually really exciting. I know obviously we were going after Axew throughout the event. I was also going after both Galarian Darumaka and Galarian Weezing, and normally I'd have to wait for the city and tundra hours for those two, but they were also spawning in the wild, at any time throughout the day, so that was really exciting that we could just go find them whenever. So I think that was a big plus for the second day.
Yeah, definitely. And I was also going after Shelmet for a majority of the day, and I think I got it during like the last few hours of Go Fest, so I was also really hyped about that. So now that we've talked about the second day of Go Fest, let's kind of wrap things up with our final thoughts about the entire event overall. So Chris, why don't we start with you? What did you think about Go Fest 2022 as a whole?
Yeah, so overall I think it did have its ups and downs. For day 1, I definitely think the habitats were nice to have as an introduction for the Go Fest, whereas the bigger spawn pool was nice for day 2, but I definitely enjoyed the spawn pools they chose. I know for day 1 there were some of the habitats that had some iffy spawns, but I think overall it was a pretty nice selection of Pokemon. And the new shiny Pokemon they introduced were definitely really good. I think my bigger problems with the event definitely came with some of the raids on the first day, and definitely Nihilego on the second day being a little bit underwhelming, but I think overall the raids were alright, definitely better for the second day. And as I said earlier, I think the rocket part of day 2 was probably one of the weaker parts of Go Fest, with it not feeling fully fleshed out, especially compared to 2020's rocket takeover. But despite those shortcomings, I definitely enjoyed going around and catching shiny Pokemon and doing some Axew raids, so I definitely found that really cool. But what about you, James? What did you think about Go Fest 2022?
So, I'd say that Go Fest 2022 was solid overall. I really enjoyed some of the habitats they had on day 1, as well as the new shiny they introduced with the event. Also, Nihilego was a really cool addition to Go Fest, and like we've said in the past, I really hope they buff it in the future. Now, I will say that in terms of the past 3 global Go Fest we've had, I'd say it's probably the weakest of the 3. I'd say that last year's Go Fest was probably my favorite, followed closely by 2020's Go Fest, and with 2022 bringing up the rear. But all things considered, it was still a really fun event, and we still have that bonus event in August to look forward to, so we have another day of Go Fest coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well guys, I think that's going to do it for our Go Fest discussion. Now before we sign off for the day, we want to hear about your Go Fest experience, so be sure to let us know how yours went down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the discussion, consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing if you're new to the channel. We cover all sorts of Pokemon content, from move and Pokemon analyses to need-to-know tips and tricks. Plus, we've got some really exciting stuff in the works that we can't tell you about just yet, so you'll have to stay tuned to find out. Chris, thanks for joining me today to talk about Go Fest.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I always enjoyed doing these kind of Pokemon events with you.
Yeah, anytime. So until next time, thank you all so much for watching. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you all in the next video. Take care.